Everyone saw the pink sneakers lying under the slide, but no one saw the moment Karen pulled the trigger. The moment the shot rang out, it felt like the entire world collapsed into a single deafening heartbeat. I can still hear that sound when I close my eyes. The whistle of the wind, the innocent squeak of the swing, then the crack of a gun. That sound didn't just pierce Lily's lung, it tore a hole through the life we'd built, one that could never be patched. 6 months earlier, I had believed Willow Creek was going to be our safe haven, just a quiet neighborhood for a tired mom and her bright-eyed daughter. The first time I met Karen Williams, she came to my door with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. She carried rules like armor and enforced them like a warden. I didn't realize then that behind that perfectly coiffed hair and clipboard smile was a storm, one waiting to strike. She watched us from windows, sent warnings through email, followed Lily through the neighborhood like some self-appointed sentinel. What I chalked up to overzealous HOA drama quickly became something darker. She told me to keep Lily off the school playground after 6 p.m. She said there would be consequences. I thought she meant fines. But the consequences arrived wrapped in the sharp bang of a handgun. One moment, Lily was at the top of the slide, brave, joyful, fearless. The next, she was lying on the ground, gasping, blood blooming across her favorite pink t-shirt. I remember falling to my knees, cradling her, whispering over and over that she would be okay. But nothing was okay. Karen stood there, her hands still, wrapped around the gun, screaming that we had broken the rules, that this was our fault, that she had been protecting the community. What community lets a child get shot for swinging too late? The paramedics rushed Lily to the hospital. The bullet had collapsed her lung. Surgery, critical condition, a coma. I watched machines breathe for my daughter. I listened to beeps instead of bedtime stories. And inside me, something broke. Karen had tried to silence my child, but instead, she woke a storm in me. The first thing I did was give everything to Detective Harris, the emails, the photos, the threats. But that wasn't enough. Karen had power, connections, money, manipulation. Her lawyer spun lies about community safety, about a child being a delinquent. I wasn't just fighting for justice. I was fighting to protect Lily from being painted as anything but what she was. A child who loved swings, stars, and sparkly shoes. Then I remembered Mrs. Patel. She lived across from the playground, always watching through her lace curtains. When I knocked on her door, her hands trembled. She had seen it all, but fear had chained her voice for too long. Karen had threatened to take her house. Just like she threatened all of us. But for Lily, Mrs. Patel agreed to speak, quietly, anonymously. It was a start, and it lit a fire. I began talking to neighbors. At first, they looked over their shoulders, but when they realized they weren't, alone, they started talking. Stories spilled out, fines for grass too long, pets taken away, lives ruined by one woman's obsession with control. But that wasn't the worst of it. It was Greg, Karen's own husband, who unraveled the thread. Found him nursing a whiskey at a downtown bar, and with careful words and quiet sympathy, I got him to talk. He told me about the notebook, Karen's twisted manifesto, pages upon pages of plans. Our names were in it, Lily's name. That notebook became the key. With Greg's tip, Detective Harris got a warrant. What they found shocked even the most hardened. Officers, detailed outlines, surveillance notes, and one entry that chilled my blood. Drastic action may be necessary to restore order. Karen wasn't protecting the community. She was planning a purge. I wasn't going to wait for the courts to wake up. I created a Facebook page, Justice for Lily Carter. I didn't shout. I just showed Lily's face, her art, her dreams, and the woman who tried to erase them. Thousands responded. The local news picked up the story, then the national networks. Karen's perfect world crumbled. She lost her job, her HOA seat, her husband. The people she once controlled turned their backs, because finally, the truth screamed louder than her lies, but none of it changed what she had done. In the courtroom, Karen sat like a statue. Her lawyer painted her as stressed, misunderstood. They called Lily a threat. Then Mrs. Patel took the stand. She spoke about the way Karen walked across the playground, about how the gun was already out, about how Lily was just playing, just smiling when I took the stand. I didn't raise my voice. I told the jury about a little girl who wanted to be an astronaut, who believed in kindness, who was scared now of loud sounds and playgrounds. You didn't just shoot my daughter, I said. You killed the version of her who believed the world was good. Karen never flinched, but the jury did. They found her guilty. Attempted murder, stalking, assault, weapons charges, 25 years. As she was led away, she screamed again about rules, about order, about protecting the neighborhood. But no one listened anymore. The settlement came next. $2.3 million. It wouldn't bring back Lily's lung or her trust, but it gave us a new start. We moved. New town. No HOA, no headlines. Just peace. For a while, Lily couldn't say the word playground. Loud noises made her shake. She stopped singing, but slowly, through therapy and art, she started to come back. Not the same Lily, but stronger. Wiser. One day she told me she wanted to help other kids who got hurt. I asked why. Because I don't want anyone to feel like I did. Alone. Afraid. When she turned 13, she gave a talk at her school. She spoke about forgiveness, about pain, about strength. And that's when I knew. Karen may have taken so much from us, but she couldn't take everything. She couldn't take Lily's heart. She couldn't take our hope. That, in the end, is the only justice that matters. 3 years after the trial, I thought the fire in my chest had finally quieted. Lily was 13 now, still smaller than the other kids, still wheezing when she ran too far or laughed too hard. But she was smiling again. She painted her dreams in watercolor now instead of living them in tree houses, and I clung to every brushstroke like it was a promise that she hadn't given up. We lived in a quiet town with no HOA signs, no surveillance cameras on corners, and no clipboard queens patrolling flower beds. I got a job at the local library, the kind of place where nothing ever really happened, and that was exactly what I needed. No rules beyond the Dewey Decimal System, no screaming, just quiet and books and the soft sound of Lily breathing beside me on weekends as she sketched animals from encyclopedias. Then one day, a letter came. The envelope had no return address, but the handwriting, neat, compulsive, practiced, turned my stomach before I even opened it. It was from Karen. From her prison cell. I almost threw it away. Almost. But curiosity is a cruel kind of poison, and something in me needed to know, needed to see if there was finally a crack in her armor. The letter started with scripture, then guilt, then pleas. I have found God in this place, she wrote. He has shown me how blind I was, how wrong. I know I can never undo what I did, but I hope you might find it in your heart to forgive me. Forgive her? She wanted peace, closure, a neat little bow to wrap around the horror she'd unleashed. She wanted to be the redeemed villain in a story that had left my daughter with permanent lung damage and a stutter she still worked every week to unravel. I read her letter 3 times, not looking for sincerity, just for something, anything, that showed she had really changed, but it wasn't there. Not once did she mention Lily by name. Not once did she ask how my daughter was doing. It was about her. Her transformation. Her salvation. Her journey. And that's when I knew. She hadn't changed. She'd simply learned to write better apologies. That night, I fed the letter to the fire. The flames took it like they'd been waiting years. The ink curled, the paper twisted, and for the first time in a long time, I exhaled without shaking. Forgiveness is something you earn. Karen never had. The truth is, even after all the justice, all the trials and headlines and victories, healing didn't come wrapped in court orders or settlement checks. Healing came slowly, painfully, in inches, not miles. Sometimes I'd find Lily on the floor of her room, clutching her sketch pad like a lifeline, staring out the window at the empty street. "Are the bad people gone?" she asked once. I didn't know how to answer, so I told her what I wished someone had told me. Some are. But even if they're not, you're stronger than they'll ever be. She nodded, then went back to drawing. Weeks later, she gave that drawing to a boy at the children's hospital where she now volunteered. His legs didn't work, but he smiled when he saw the bluebird she'd painted soaring over a swing set. "I used to be afraid of swings," Lily told him softly, "but not anymore." That boy taped the picture above his bed, and in that moment I saw something no courtroom could give me. I saw purpose. Karen tried to bury us in fear, but Lily had started building something new from the ashes. Later that spring, the local middle school held a community assembly. They asked Lily to speak about her experience. She was nervous, clutched her notes like they might vanish. But when she stepped up to the microphone, her voice was steady. "There are people in the world who think power means hurting others," she said. "But they're wrong. Real strength is kindness. Real courage is healing." Her classmates sat in stunned silence. When she finished, they stood. All of them. Not because they knew the full story, but because they felt it. And in that moment, I knew Lily wasn't just surviving anymore. She was leading. She had turned pain into purpose, trauma into truth. I was proud of her. More than words can say, and I knew something else too. Karen Williams was still locked behind cold steel bars, 3 states away. She would grow old there, alone, forgotten. Her empire of order and rules had crumbled into dust. She once thought she was the guardian of her neighborhood, but all she had guarded was her own delusions, and the only legacy she'd left behind was the bravery of the little girl she tried to silence. Sometimes on quiet nights, I think about what forgiveness really means. Is it silence? Is it peace? Or is it knowing you no longer owe your enemy anything? Not your anger, not your attention, not even your memory? Because I don't think about Karen much anymore. I think about Lily, her laughter, her courage, her quiet, steady hands teaching smaller kids how to hold a paintbrush. I think about how she tells her story now, not as a victim, but as someone who came out of the darkness holding light. That's what real power looks like. It isn't a gun, or a gavel, or a rule book. It's a 13-year-old girl with a crooked smile and a stubborn heartbeat who still chooses to love the world, even when it hasn't always loved her back. And that's something no HOA president can ever take away. Not in this lifetime. Not in the next. Some memories don't fade. They wait. They hide in corners, in the echo of a swing set, in the sharp pop of fireworks on a summer night. For Lily, it was the smell of hospital soap. That sterile, too-clean scent haunted her dreams. Even years after, the shooting, the moment we'd walk into a doctor's office, she'd grip my hand until her knuckles turned white. "I'm okay," she always whispered. But I could see the storm in her eyes. Trauma has no schedule, no calendar for when it decides to strike. It just lingers, quiet, patient. And then one day, it hits. Lily was 14 when the nightmares came back with a vengeance. They started around the anniversary of the shooting. At first, just a few bad dreams. Then sleepwalking. Then silence. She wouldn't talk, wouldn't eat, wouldn't draw, and I knew we weren't done healing. I booked her into an intensive trauma program in the city. It was expensive, far from home. But we had the settlement money, and I would have sold every last belonging to save her again. The program was hard. Dr. Martinez, her longtime psychologist, said it might get worse before it got better. It did. One day, Lily locked herself in her room and refused to come out. I sat on the floor outside the door listening to her cry, powerless. "I wish she'd finished it," Lily whispered through the wood. "I wouldn't feel like this if she had." Those words cracked something in me I didn't know was still whole. I had spent years fighting to keep Lily alive, but I hadn't seen how much she was still hurting, how much she blamed herself. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched old videos, ones I hadn't touched in years. Her 5th birthday party. Her first time singing in the school talent show. The morning she drew a rainbow and told me it was our future, and I remembered she wasn't broken, she was lost. But I could still find her. The next morning I told her we were taking a road trip. "Where?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Back to Willow Creek." Her eyes widened. "Why would we ever go back there?" "Because ghosts don't disappear just because you run from them," I said. "Sometimes you have to face them, to leave them behind." She didn't argue. 3 days later, we were on the highway, her sketchbook on her lap, untouched. Willow Creek hadn't changed much, but we had. The house Karen once ruled from sat dark and overgrown. For sale signs drooped on the lawn. No one had dared move in. We parked across from the playground, the same rusted bench, the same slide with the blue seat. The same spot where everything shattered. Lily stood frozen for a long time. Then she walked toward the swings, not fast, not brave, just steady. I watched her sit, watched her push herself gently, and then I saw it. Her shoulders loosened. Her face tilted up toward the sun. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. That was the moment I knew she was starting to take her life back. Afterward, we visited the library where I once worked. Some of the old neighbors, even Mrs. Patel, who broke into tears when she saw Lily. "You look like a miracle," she whispered, hugging her tightly. And maybe she was. Before we left town, Lily left something behind. A painting she'd done quietly, the night before. It was of the playground, but brighter, safer. Children laughing, no shadows. She left it on the library wall, no name, no signature, just hope. Driving back, she turned to me and said, "I want to write my story one day, not for court. Not for the news, just so kids like me know they aren't alone." My throat tightened. I reached over and held her hand. "You already are," I said. Back home, she began painting again, not just for herself, but for others. She started volunteering more at the children's hospital, started organizing art workshops for kids with trauma. Her strength didn't come in loud declarations. It came in her quiet refusal to be bitter, to live, to love, to forgive, even if she never forgot. One night, while cleaning out the attic, I found the only photo I still had of Karen Williams. A grainy newspaper shot from the trial. For a second, I froze. Then I looked at the woman in the picture and felt nothing. Not hate, not rage, just emptiness. She had taken so much, but she hadn't won. Not really. She was sitting in a concrete box while Lily was changing lives with every brushstroke. That's what victory looks like. Not revenge, but resilience. And Lily, she was becoming unstoppable. It was a Wednesday when I got the call. I was shelving books at the library, Lily down the street at her art workshop, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Mrs. Carter?" a man's voice asked. "My name is James Lockwood. I'm a journalist. I've been investigating HOA corruption cases around the state, and I think we need to talk about Karen Williams." My heart stilled. "I thought that chapter was closed," I said. "I thought so too," he replied. But Karen's influence didn't die with her sentence, and I've uncovered some things I think you deserve to see. I wasn't sure I wanted to see anything more about that woman. But that night, when Lily was asleep, I met James at a diner, 3 towns over. He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were emails, signed complaints, and court transcripts from other neighborhoods. Different towns, same script. Karen had used fake complaints to get people evicted, bribed HOA inspectors, falsified documents to seize properties. She had a system, James said, and Willow Creek wasn't her first neighborhood, just the first one where someone pushed back. One letter stood out. It was from a man named Daniel Kim, an elderly veteran who had lost his home in a different HOA Karen once ran. She'd accused him of hoarding, had animal control seize his therapy dog, and got him evicted over a cracked fence post. 2 years later, he died of pneumonia, alone. Her hands are in dozens of ruined lives, James said. But only one person ever got justice. That hit me hard. I had been so focused on protecting Lily. I hadn't realized how wide Karen's shadow stretched. How many people never got a voice? I agreed to speak to James for his report, not just for Lily, but for all the voices Karen tried to erase. The article dropped a week later. Queen of the HOA, the Karen Williams scandal. My face wasn't in it. But Lily's story was. So were the others, dozens of them. The town buzzed, my inbox flooded. Some messages were from supporters, others were from people still afraid, but one message stood out. From Greg, Karen's ex-husband. He had read the article. He wanted to meet. I hadn't seen him since the trial. Had barely thought about him beyond that night at the bar when he drunkenly spilled his wife's secrets. Now he was sober. Different. He met me at the same park where Lily first learned to draw with chalk. His hands shook as he spoke. I live in Arizona now, he said. Got therapy. Got clean. I read your story. I needed to tell you something I should have told the police. I listened, and what he said made my skin crawl. There was another child, he whispered. Before Lily. In another town. Karen got into a feud with a single father. His daughter used to play soccer late at the neighborhood park. Karen filed dozens of complaints. She even slashed his tires. But the final straw was the fire. What fire? I asked. The girl's soccer bag, lit on fire on their porch. No one proved it was Karen, but the father moved his daughter out of state. 2 weeks later, told me he was done playing games with a lunatic. I couldn't breathe. She'd escalated before. We weren't her first lesson, just the one that made it to court. Why didn't you tell anyone? I asked. Greg looked away. Because I was weak and scared. And I thought, maybe she'd change. We sat in silence for a long time. Then I said, people like her don't change. They just hide. He nodded. But I'm not hiding anymore. He agreed to go on record. James updated the article, and Karen's legacy collapsed further. The prison board denied her early parole hearing. Her appeals were rejected. And the community that once whispered her name with fear now spoke it with disgust. But the part that mattered most? Lily saw the article, and for the first time, she understood the full picture. Mom, she said quietly, it wasn't just me. No, I said, wrapping my arms around her. But it was you who stopped her. Her eyes welled up. And in them? I didn't see the scared girl on the slide anymore. I saw a fighter, a survivor, a young woman who carried other people's stories the way most kids carry backpacks, heavy but proud. Later that month, Lily was invited to speak at a youth advocacy conference. She stood in front of hundreds of people and told the truth. Not just about the shooting, but about living through the aftermath, about therapy, about art, about finding strength when you have every reason to give up. And when she finished, the entire room stood in silence. Then they clapped. Not because she was a victim, but because she had become something more, someone who could make change, someone who already had. The more Lily spoke, the more the world started to listen. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a symbol, a voice for children silenced by fear, a face for families destroyed by unchecked power. She wasn't just telling her story, she was helping others tell theirs. But I worried. I worried about the weight, because even bravery has limits, and sometimes, when the spotlight fades, the silence is louder than ever. It started small. Lily began sleeping with her light on again. Stopped. Sketching before bed. When I asked if anything was wrong, she'd smile too quickly. Just tired, Mom. But I knew that smile. It was the one I wore during the trial, when I pretended everything was fine. When my hands shook behind closed doors and my screams stayed buried in pillows. Then one afternoon I found her crying in the laundry room. Silent. Shoulders shaking, face buried in a towel. I didn't ask what was wrong. I just held her. Eventually she whispered, "What if I'm only brave when people are watching?" I pulled back, met her eyes. "You're brave because you get back up, even when no one's looking." She nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. The next morning, something happened that I still don't fully understand. A letter showed up in our mailbox. No stamp, no envelope, just folded paper. It read, "The community may have buried me, but my words still matter." She was warned. Don't forget that. No signature, no return address. But I knew that handwriting. I had memorized every loop, every rigid stroke. Karen. My hands trembled as I read it again. This wasn't just an old note. Someone had brought it, delivered it. But Karen was still in prison. So who? That question echoed through my bones. I called Detective Harris immediately. He hadn't heard from us in years, but his voice still carried that steady calm. "We'll look into it," he promised. "Do you have a camera at your door?" We did. But there was nothing on the footage. No one approached. No one visible. Harris said he'd send a tech team to check for tampering. In the meantime, he warned, "Be careful. It might not be Karen, but someone's trying to rattle you." That night, I locked every door twice. Then I sat in Lily's room until she fell asleep, watching her chest rise and fall. The next day, a box arrived. No sender listed. Inside, a charred, broken piece of playground equipment. It was unmistakable. The metal handle from the slide where Lily had been shot, burned at the edges, and underneath it, a single photograph. Our house. Taken recently. I felt my legs give out. Not from fear. From fury. Karen was behind bars, but someone was still fighting for her legacy. The police launched an investigation. They searched our property, checked mail carriers, interviewed former Willow Creek residents, and that's when they found him. A man named Randall Briggs, a former HOA board member. Quiet, retired, no criminal record. But he had been a loyal supporter of Karen, wrote letters to the paper defending her, filed character testimonies during her trial, and when police searched his home, they found a shrine, photos of Karen, clippings from the trial, and dozens of handwritten notes, threats, outlines, even a journal. One entry, read, "If the system won't defend her honor, I will. The girl is a symbol of chaos. Order must be restored." I felt sick. Lily wasn't being haunted by the past. She was being hunted by its echo. Briggs was arrested, charged with harassment, stalking, and intent to intimidate a witness. He didn't resist, didn't deny anything. When asked why, he said, "Karen was right. That girl broke the rules." That girl. Lily. Still, after all these years, there were people who saw her as a threat, not because she did anything wrong, but because she dared to survive. We spent the next few weeks in lockdown, moved into a secure location while the case unfolded. Lily didn't cry, didn't speak much, just sat with her sketch pad, drawing darker and darker things. Storm clouds, eyes watching from trees, locks on playground gates. Dr. Martinez increased her sessions, and one night, she said something I'll never forget. "I'm tired of being someone's symbol," Lily whispered. "I just want to be Lily." That broke me, because she deserved to be a kid, not a case study, not an advocate, just a girl who liked bluebirds and swing sets and art. So we stepped back. No more speeches, no more conferences, just breathing. We moved again. A new home, new locks, no news. And this time, we didn't tell anyone. We didn't owe the world anything more. Lily didn't owe anyone her pain. The next few months were quiet, peaceful. She started laughing again. Started drawing forests, oceans, wildflowers. One day she painted a girl sitting alone on a swing, but instead of fear, the girl was smiling. "Free?" I asked her what it meant. She shrugged. "She's alone, but she's safe." That was enough, for both of us. It was a year before Lily spoke her story again, not at a conference, not on a stage, just across a lunch table to a girl with tear-streaked cheeks and trembling hands. Her name was Abigail, 11 years old, a quiet child in Lily's new art therapy group. Her brother had been injured in a drive-by shooting. They'd moved across 3 states, changed schools twice, and Abigail hadn't spoken a word in weeks, until Lily handed her a paintbrush and said softly, "You don't have to talk. Just paint what hurts." That afternoon, Abigail drew a shattered window with 2 hands reaching for each other. Then she looked up and asked, "Does it ever stop hurting?" Lily paused. Then she nodded once. "No," she said, "but it stops being the only thing you feel." It wasn't a speech, it wasn't public, but it mattered more than all the interviews and articles combined. That night, Lily told me, "I think I want to be a trauma counselor someday. For kids." My chest tightened. She had lost so much, but somehow, she still wanted to give, still believed she had something to offer. That's when I knew she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was becoming. But peace, I've learned, is never permanent. It's borrowed, conditional, something to be fought for. Again and again. One morning, Lily went out to walk the dog before school. 10 minutes later, she came back inside, pale and shaking. "There's something on the porch," she said. I ran outside, and there it was. A single photo, faded, old, but unmistakable. It was Lily, 9 years old, on the playground, the day before the shooting. Sitting on the swing with her sparkly pink shoes, smiling wide, someone had written across it in red ink, "Still watching." I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't Briggs. He was still in custody. Someone else was playing this game now. The police launched another investigation, reviewed old files, checked for possible accomplices. Every theory led to a dead end. But we knew what the message meant. Even after prison bars and lawsuits and news coverage, there were still shadows, still people who believed the lie. That order meant obedience, that children like Lily were the enemy. We tightened security, moved again. I began to wonder if we'd ever stop running. And Lily? She didn't scream, didn't cry, but she stopped painting again, stopped smiling. The light dimmed. One night I found her tearing her sketchbook apart, page by page. "I'm tired," she whispered. "Tired of being someone's target." And I realized she wasn't afraid of getting hurt. She was afraid of being defined by pain. That night I sat beside her on the floor and said something I'd never admitted aloud. "I'm tired too." We cried together, not because we were weak, but because we'd been strong for too long. After that, something shifted. Lily started writing letters, not to the press, not for court, just letters she'd never send. One was to Karen. It read, "You didn't win. You didn't break me. You turned me into a mirror, and I saw the parts of me you could never touch." Another was to herself. "Dear Lily, you're allowed to rest. You're allowed to be more than what happened. You are not broken. You are becoming." Then, quietly, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived. From the parole board, Karen Williams had filed again, attempted a new strategy, claimed her psychological state during the shooting made her criminally irresponsible, claimed she had reformed, had shown remorse, and now deserved early release. There would be a hearing, and they invited us to submit a statement. My stomach turned at the thought of seeing her name on paper again. But Lily, she didn't flinch. "I want to write it," she said. And she did. She didn't write with anger. She didn't curse or beg. She told the board what it was like to live with nightmares, how playgrounds still made her flinch, how she couldn't run without losing breath, how she hadn't just been shot. She had been followed, stalked, hunted long before that bullet left the chamber. And then she wrote, "Forgiveness is a journey I walk every day, but release is not forgiveness, and justice is not revenge. It's remembering what really happened and protecting every other child like me from ever knowing what it feels like to be hunted by someone who thinks rules are more important than life." We mailed it and waited. The day of the hearing, we didn't attend. We went to the ocean instead. Let the wind carry something else. 3 weeks later, the letter came. Parole denied. Karen would serve her full sentence. When I told Lily, she nodded, softly. But she didn't celebrate. She just whispered, "Good. Now maybe we can rest." That night, she slept with the lights off for the first time in 2 years, and I stood in the hallway, watching her breathe, knowing that the world still held its monsters. But this child, this girl, she was stronger than every single one of them. Healing isn't a moment. It's not the hospital discharge. It's not the trial verdict. It's not even the denial of parole. Healing is the quiet afterward, the empty spaces where fear used to live, and the slow realization that you can fill those spaces with something else. Lily had begun to laugh again. Not politely, not carefully, but with her whole chest. She volunteered weekly, spoke at youth shelters, created art that lived in hospital wings and recovery centers. But it wasn't just about helping others anymore. She was helping herself. She'd learned to breathe through anxiety, to walk past playgrounds without shaking, to open windows again, to dance when music played. And one afternoon, while I was unloading groceries, she sat me down with a look I hadn't seen in years, one of quiet confidence. "Mom," she said, "I applied to an art school in Vermont." My breath caught. She had always drawn. But this was stepping beyond the safety we'd built, beyond the protective walls I'd wrapped around her. "I want to go," she continued. "I need to." My heart wanted to say no, but my soul, it was proud. We cried. Then we celebrated. She got in, full scholarship. Her first instinct was to share it with Dr. Martinez. Her second was to paint a new self-portrait, this one with a smile. But joy, I've learned, has a shadow, and shadows always watch for an opening. 2 weeks before her move, I received an envelope. No name, just one photo inside. Karen's, an old one, from her real estate days. Perfect hair, polished smile, HOA sash pinned to her shoulder. On the back, in blue ink, it read, "You may have won the trial, but order never dies." My hands trembled. I showed it to the police. They ran fingerprints, postmark analysis, everything. Nothing. It was likely from an old supporter, maybe someone we'd missed. "Just noise," Detective Harris said. "People who want you afraid." But it wasn't noise to me, because it meant someone still saw her as more than a convicted criminal. Someone still wanted her remembered. I didn't show Lily. Not until the morning she was packing for Vermont. She held the photo for a long time. Didn't cry, didn't speak, just turned it over and wrote something on the back. Then she tore it in half and tossed it into the fireplace. Never asked what she wrote. I figured it was for her, and whoever had sent the message. But as the ashes curled, I watched her square her shoulders and zip up her suitcase. "I'm ready," she said, and she was. We drove to Vermont together. 10 hours. Long stretches of highway, gas station coffee, and playlists filled with old songs she used to sing before the shooting. When we reached the campus, green trees, old brick buildings, the smell of pine in the air, Lily smiled wider than I'd seen in years. "This place doesn't know me as the girl who got shot," she whispered. "I get to just be Lily." And that's when I knew. We had finally crossed the invisible line between surviving and living. Still, the first night I drove away, my chest felt hollow. I returned home to silence, to stillness, to a space that had been full of her laughter, her sketchbooks, her energy. But instead of pain, I felt something else. Gratitude. She was living the life that had almost been stolen, and she was doing it without fear. A week later, she sent me her first photo from campus. It was a painting she had submitted for her first class project. A girl in pink shoes swinging high into a golden sky. But in the corner, subtle, nearly hidden, was the silhouette of another figure. Watching, still, below. It she'd written, "The world watches, but I choose who I become." I stared at that line for a long time, then I framed it, hung it in the hallway. Because that's what this story really was, not about villains or bullets or HOA rules. It was about choice. Lily had been followed, threatened, shot, harassed, labeled, chased, but she still chose to rise, still chose to dream, and no letter, no shadow, no reminder of the past could rewrite that. She was more than what happened to her. She was her own story now. 4 years after the shooting, Lily stood on a small stage in Vermont, not in front of a courtroom, not at a trauma conference, just a quiet college auditorium. She was presenting her final portfolio, her thesis. It wasn't just a collection of art. It was a memoir on canvas, a story only she could tell. Each piece was a chapter. The blue swing, the hospital light, the silent bedroom, the court shadows, the broken sketchbook, the first deep breath of freedom. At the center of it all was one painting. Massive, almost 6 feet tall. It showed a little girl standing in a cracked playground, surrounded by figures in shadows. Their faces were blank, menacing, watching. But the girl, she held a paintbrush like a sword, and behind her, light was breaking through. When Lily unveiled it, the room went still. Then came the applause. Not loud, not wild, just heartfelt. Because everyone in that room saw what I saw. A girl who had been silenced, now speaking louder than ever. Afterward, her professor pulled her aside and asked, "Who are the figures in the shadows?" Lily didn't hesitate. "They're not just people," she said. "They're fear. They're memory. They're the stories that try to own you." "And the light?" She smiled. "That's me." When she called me that night, she didn't talk about awards or grades. She said, "Mom, I think I'm free now." I closed my eyes and let the tears come. Not because she was hurting, but because she wasn't. We talked for hours that night about the past, about what we lost, about what we still carried. And then she said something that struck me deep. "You know what I realized? Karen's not my villain anymore." I paused. "What do you mean?" "She used to take up space in every corner of my story, but now she's just A page. A dark one. Yeah, but just a page. Not the book. That's when I knew. We had won. Not just in court, not just in headlines, but in life. In soul, Karen Williams was still serving her sentence. She had been denied parole again the year before. Her name, once spoken with fear, had become a cautionary tale in HOA training seminars. No one called her a hero now. No one defended her anymore. She faded. And Lily? She flourished. She launched. A non-profit from her dorm room, Art of the After. It sent supplies and trauma-based art kits to kids recovering from violence. She traveled, she spoke, she painted, and quietly, she forgave. Not for Karen, but for herself. Because holding on to the pain kept her in the moment of the gunshot. Letting go? That brought her back to the moment before it, when the world was just a swing, a breeze, a sparkle in her shoes. She visited Willow Creek once more, alone this time. She didn't tell me she was going. I found out when she mailed me a postcard. It was blank, except for a photo she'd taken of the old playground. On the back, she'd written one sentence. I stood where I fell, and this time, I walked away. That postcard sits in my kitchen now, framed, next to the one photo I still keep of Lily as a child, 9 years old. Pink sneakers, laughing so hard her eyes disappeared, because that's who she was before the shot, and somehow, miraculously, it's who she became again. Not because the world was kind, but because she was. Because strength, real strength, isn't loud. It's a girl who paints in the dark, who walks back into fear and says, not this time. Who forgives, not to forget, but to live. So here's the truth. Karen shot my daughter on a playground and tried to break her spirit. But Lily rose, and now she builds worlds from the ashes. She gives voice to silence, she gives color to pain, and every time she lifts a brush, she proves that rules don't make a community. People do. And love survives everything, even a bullet, even a shadow, even Karen Williams. That's the end of this chapter. But Lily's story? It's only just begun.